alaikum, peace be upon you, and welcome to Ashura Reflections, a brand new series of podcasts to be delivered over the 10 days of Muharram. This Muharram is not like others. We are not able to rely upon the majalis of Abu Abdullah in the way we used to, year by year. Those institutions which we inherited from our ancestors of mourning are not accessible to us. And yet we are still able to mourn for Abu Abdullah in our homes as we walk and as we drive, and through reflecting on his message. That being said, this is a brand new series in which each night yourself and me will be joined by a group of scholars, experts, and individuals who have a scholarly interest in different themes of Ashura, ideas of our life and how we live, which we obtain from the mission of Abu Abdullah. What he did all those years ago emanates in the way that we live our lives today. And so this series is to bring together people who are interested in knowing how we gain different aspects of our reality directly from Ashura. Now, over the next few nights, you will join me in seeing a number of discussions on different aspects, but in all of them, I asked every single guest one question. And that question was, when you look at the day of Ashura, what do you see? So here now is a compilation of the answers given by our various guests taking part in this series of Ashura Reflections. When you look at Ashura, what do you see?
When I see Ashura, I see freedom, I see victory of the oppressed and small in number over the oppressor. I see the magnificence of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and I see love, passion and faith of all the believers for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. I see the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I see his magnificent being which reflects in Karbala and Ashura, and I see grief that takes us back to 61 Hijrah.
When I look at the day of Ashura, what I see is that life is born as opposed to death occurring, because through this movement, yes, there is a sacrifice that has happened and it's the greatest sacrifice. But through this, when we say life, we personify the concepts of justice which needs to be implemented into this world. Until today, the justice hasn't been implemented, yet the movement carries on, which is the hope and perfection of the inner beings and souls of individuals to try and attain the higher positions of inner development in nearness to Allah, and that way it can catalyze the reappearance of our 12th Imam by him having good soldiers to implement the eternal justice which will happen with him.
When I see the day of Ashura, the only thing that I see are the sublime metaphysical qualities that every human being seeks to understand and desire. That of justice, that of patience, that of generosity, that of compassion, that of mercy, that of beauty. On the day of Ashura and on the holy plains of Karbala, all of these most perfect qualities were illuminated by Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his family members and companions.
When I think of Ashura, I see unconscious beings versus supreme conscious and truth, the absolute form of darkness and light. What I see in Ashura is seeking justice and truth no matter the consequences, and sticking by that all the way through. And this is what made it eternal, perhaps. When I think of Ashura, I think of eternity. I think of love and sacrifice. And when I think of Ashura, I think of a mission statement that is for me and for you.
When I look at the events of Ashura, what I see, what I take from the day, is the ultimate way to live my life. To live my life encompassing humanity, looking out for my friends, embracing different groups, looking after my friends, my family, and making a stance against injustice and oppression wherever it is.
When I look at Ashura, what I see is a movement, a revolution, a stand which is a stand which inspires millions of people from every single time. It's a stand which inspires us to be better people. It is a stand which inspires us to work towards social justice in society. It's a stand which inspires us to actually be active people in our society. So really it's a stand which makes me think, which makes the person who reads, who learns, who finds out about this, to think, what can I do in my society, what can I do in my community to make this a better place, to make this society, this community a better, more just, more equitable place.
When I look at the day of Ashura, I think that, Karbala is like a magnet. So, it draws everybody towards it. Obviously, people who know what happened at Karbala, there is this kind of compulsion to go towards Karbala, to go towards the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam. And I also kind of see sadness in the way that the Ahlul Bayt were let down in some ways. Sometimes I feel kind of embarrassed, in terms of the way we as Shia, people who claim to be their Shia, behave and have behaved, and our failings as Shia. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, regardless of what we do to respond to his sacrifice, his sacrifice is accepted by Allah. So the victory of his sacrifice doesn't depend on anybody. But at the same time, the reasons that led to his sacrifice are still there today. So the corruption, the lies, the deception that goes on, the hypocrisy, even characteristics within our own selves that we could improve upon. Every year I do feel like I want to apologize to Imam Hussein alayhi salam on behalf of anyone who's upset him, myself, whoever may have upset the Ahlul Bayt or disappointed them or been an embarrassment. I just apologize.
When I look at the day of Ashura, I see a range of ethical values whose applications are within a range of different contexts, and they're carefully considered. I see courage, loyalty, deep insight and foresight, and also spiritual connection with God. And that's not the only thing. I also see a range of historical contexts, an understanding of people, politics, and an understanding of what makes people tick and how you should react to them. And that is the most important thing for me on the day of Ashura.
The 10th of Muharram is a day of freedom, a day of sacrifice, and a day of true opportunity for self-change and development. When I recall what Hussein ibn Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, his family, his companions, achieved and sacrificed on the day of Ashura, I see the potential, I see the opportunity, I see the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted so many people, that we are still in this world and we can still determine our future, both in this world and akhirah. It's about awakening the conscience. We are in a deep sleep or slumber. It's about recognizing the divine guidance and leadership. It's about understanding the rights of people, such as the minorities. It's about standing against injustice and oppression. But above all, for me, the characteristic ethos and the spirit of Ashura, when I look at the 10th of Muharram, is to do with sincerity and devotion to God. Each and every one of these individuals did what they did because they absolved and loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much that nothing would move them and their determination. They were unshakable, absolutely resolute, loyal to the path of God, and they were not willing under any circumstances to change their path towards anything else. And that strength, that courage, that loyalty is what is a powerful message that emerges, together with their compassion, together with their desire to positively change the lives of others, to invite others. Imam al-Hussein's sermons, which contain so many verses of the Quran, which contain so much advice, was there to try and help human beings. He wanted salvation for humankind. So 10th of Muharram is an opportunity for prosperity and for salvation.
I think Ashura provides us with a lot of great information about some of the topics which are very important to us. Topics like, what is my potential as a human being? Can I reach a place where no matter what happens outside, I have peace and beauty within me? What is my worth? Can others damage my worth? Can my own actions damage my worth? What is my relationship with God? Can I believe that God has unconditional love for me? What is my relationship with death? All of these are questions that Ashura has answers for, but with a condition, and that is if you really look for them. I believe the story of Ashura, the story has a lot of frames, and each frame is a window that we should look through and hunt for gems, because I think the answers will only come to those who really look for it.
When I look at the day of Ashura, what I see is an implementation and a translation, a true translation of the Holy Quran. I see the book of God being used, and the principles that has been taught throughout this book, taught to us by the Prophet, all in action. I see many elements of the book existing and showing us how should we be bringing this into our lives. How does the book of God look like in action, the teachings that we have throughout it? I find this in Ashura. I find this not only in Imam Hussein, but the individuals that surrounded Imam Hussein. From the central themes of the Quran, from how the Quran speaks about the relationship between the servant and God, between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His creation, and what human beings should aspire towards. I see all of that in that one day and the events following that day of Ashura.
When I see the day of Ashura, the words of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam emanate. Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I see nothing in it but beauty. From one perspective, you see the absolute potential of humanity to do the worst that it could possibly do to other human beings, and that is embodied in the camp of Yazid. And so you actually learn about the potential calamity of what the human soul can potentially become. And the other side, you actually see the potential of what the human being can become, and such a godly nature that can emanate from a human being that, despite all of his family and friends having been butchered in front of him, he still weeps on behalf of his enemies, praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on their behalf. and telling them, fear that you will end up in the pitfalls of hell. You actually see a human being.
On the fateful and decisive day of the 10th of Muharram in the year 61 AH, we see a convergence in which all the prophetic traits, the traits of godliness, the traits of love, ikhlas, sincerity, selflessness, istiqamah, steadfastness, sabr, perseverance and sacrifice converged and manifested themselves in the personages of Sayyid al-Shuhada and his companions, whom in their righteous stand against darkness amplified these prophetic traits to such an extent that nothing prior or post could ever compare with that spectacular display of nur. Inna al-Husayn misbah al-huda wa safinatun najat. And that is why when Sayyidah Zainab Salamullah alayha, that mountain of patience was brought before the butcher Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, she stood with iftikhar, with honor and glory, such that when the tyrant asked, Kayfa ra'iti fa'alallah bi ahl baytik, how do you see what God did to your family at Karbala? She responded, Ma ra'itu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. Hussein ibn Ali alayhim as-salam and his companions, with the shedding of their blood, disclosed and revealed the true beauty of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Ma ra'itu illa jamila.
The pain of Karbala, when we see certain things, we tend to stop and remember the pain of Imam al-Hussein and what was done to him by certain people. And I say to myself, do I want to be that person who is hurting my Imam, or do I want to be the person who was hurt from my Imam? So inshallah, that will be something for our young brothers and sisters now who are listening to take into consideration. You should suffer for your Imam, you should hurt for your Imam, because in that you will become a better person, inshallah.
When I look at the event of Ashura and Karbala and what took place with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I see a manifestation of beauty, manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine beauty shown by the way in which Imam Hussein alayhi salam acts on that day. And one of the statements which I think sums up this divine beauty, sums up this jamal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was expressed in this event, is what many have narrated and mentioned about the last few moments of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salatu wasalam, where it is said that the more tragedies that were placed on his nafs, on his soul, the more he went through, the more difficulties he saw, i.e. the more bodies of loved ones that he had to pick and bring back to the tents, the more we saw an increase on his face of itmi'nan and tranquility, the more he was radi and pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this for me is a clear manifestation of Imam Hussein alayhi salam being a madhhar, and someone that makes apparent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine beauty and jamal.
When I think of the day of Ashura, I think of two things. One is the dedication and love of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam and his companions. And second, the love that throughout the history has been showed by the lovers of Ahlul Bayt and Imam Hussein in particular to him. Ashura cannot be for me only just about what happened at that time. I always am amazed by the beauty of the lovers of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam and what they have done. And the day of Ashura is the peak of that beautiful connection with Abu Abdullah alayhi salam.
When I look at Ashura, I see Tawheed, I see Wilayah, but above all, I see love. Ashura for me is a day of love. Servants who loved Allah and were willing to give everything away for that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Servants who loved their master and sacrificed everything for their master. When I look at Ashura, I see a family full of love, but the love of Allah was greater. And so while you see the pain of that family because of their individual love, you still see the love of Allah is still greater, and they give everything away for that love. Ashura is a day of the purest form of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I see Ashura, I see love.
I think there's only one word, and it's ishbazi, if you look at the Farsi of that. Basically, it's like a game of love between Creator and his proof on earth, whereby you see one saying to the other, you know, what can you give me? And here Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam said, I can give you my brother and my children and my own life and every drop of my blood. So that's what I see. I see a kind of a relationship between the creator and the created, and it's a very kind of profound love. That's what I see. I see it's like a light, it's like a sun. It gives me hope. Although the day of Ashura itself, there's a sense of urgency that I need to connect onto that hope. But if I look at it outside of Ashura, you just see it's like the sun, it's like a light. And it shines in your own life, gives you hope, and gives you this warm feeling. I guess it teaches you many different lessons over a period of a lifetime. Then you start seeing things according to your own experiences of that life. But if it was just down to one word, it's, as they say, ishbazi. It's just love.
When you look at Ashura, I wonder what you see. Whatever reflections or experiences that come from your connection to Imam al-Hussein, they must be in the language of love, for love is in the nature of Ali Muhammad and their communication with us. Over the next 9 nights, let us look deeper into the words of Imam al-Hussein, his speeches, his messages, his letters, his writings and his decisions, to extract from them these large thematic discussions, Ashura and history, as we will see tomorrow. How do we understand Ashura as our origin and the origin of all things? Ashura and society. How do we, in our contemporary climate, take messages from Abu Abdullah's conduct with his community in our own political environment? How do we become social activists for Abu Abdullah? Ashura and Quran. How do we use the Book of Allah to understand the thinking of Imam al-Hussein? And similarly, how do we understand Imam al-Hussein by the way he uses the Quran? Ashura and poetry. The narrative of Imam al-Hussein which has survived through this medium. What do we understand from Abu Abdullah, from the writings of the poets and the ink of the poets? Ashura and philosophy. How do I radically transform my relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal by the way Hussein speaks to Allah and the way Allah communicates with Hussein? Ashura and growth. How do me and you build plans for our own personal development using Abu Abdullah as a template for self-growth and flourishing? Ashura and mysticism. How does Imam al-Hussein's journey of unity with the divine and final reunion with the beloved impact on my own spiritual life today? And finally and ultimately, Ashura and destiny. How do we use Ashura, Imam al-Hussein, and that day to understand God's plan today for humanity, for the coming of the Imam, for unity and for the end of all things? What is the context of Imam al-Hussein in eternity? These discussions will lead us towards that fateful day of Ashura, which we are always moving closer and closer towards. And each night, join me as we have these discussions to better understand reflections from Ashura.